Hello, everybody! Pearlo Wisdom from RNJ Media, where I'm going to have my own show. Yes, Pucking Deep coming up. RNJ reached out to me, asked me if I could do for a show for them, and I will be doing my new show starting in the regular season. Look for my team previews, which will be coming up as the websites and stuff go on. I'm working on with them already. But today, I'm going to talk about Connor McDavid and the whole schmoozle that's going on. Oh, we got Toronto fans saying he's going to Toronto and all of that. And that could be. But we're going to look at three major things that McDavid said. The three major things when he first was interviewed after Edmonton got eliminated from the Florida Panthers. His big message was, if I believe I can win over and over and over again in Edmonton, I will sign. And then he said, but I'm in no hurry. I'll take my time. Then there was a lot of very strong insiders that were saying that he was going to sign in September. There's still that he was going to sign before the season started, and now it's come out that he's not going to sign when the season started. And so right around the time that insiders said he was going to sign, basically when he came back from holidays and stuff like that, he basically said, I'm still deciding. I'm not sure, and I am in no hurry whatsoever. So not long after that, they asked him again. He had all of his equipment on. He's at practice and stuff like that now. And he said, I'm talking to the Oilers, and I'm looking for something that is going to be good for Edmonton. It's going to be good for me. That's what he said. And it could be 8 years. It could be 4 years. It could be no years. That's right. It could be no years. In other words, I believe he hasn't made up his mind. Now, somebody brought up a pretty good point that it sounds like he was just annoyed with the media and he didn't want the questions. And he really wants to say, if people say that it's going to be a distraction for the team. One of the things he said was, if my contract is a distraction to teammates, they probably shouldn't be playing. And I actually liked that comment. That was pretty cool. If you're not a big boy, if you're worried about my contract and what I'm going to do, and you can't focus on this season, you're probably not going to be winning a cup anyways. I actually really like that. So he's not worried about it being a distraction to the team. However, it seems like he's telling the media, if you don't want this to be a distraction, why don't you just shut up and leave me alone? Then it won't be a distraction. So it's possible, somebody said, that he was just saying that to kind of send that message to the media, which isn't going to work. And it's an interesting theory, but I just think that he hasn't made up his mind. And I don't think he's made up his mind whether he's going to be an Oiler or not, although he is working out a pretty good deal. Okay, so here's my personal opinion on this, and you can look at my the last show done on the Ice Guys, voted the best betting podcast in North America last year, and I'm fortunate enough to be part of it, where I said, after it was over, I didn't think McDavid was going to sign in Edmonton. And I didn't think. And now here's my reason why, and this is what I think McDavid is looking at as well. They've been there 10 years, and they have been able to get some players. They got Hyman, great player. Drew him in. He came, no problems. But for the most part, how many players have they brought in? They drafted Hopkins, and he has been an Oiler through and through. They drafted Draisaitl, and he became an Oiler through and through. But you get Hopkins, McDavid, Hyman, Draisaitl. And the rest are just kind of mix and match. Brought in Kane, whatever, mix and match. And it wasn't really a great roster, to tell you the honest truth. And this is where people really get upset with me in Edmonton. They say, oh, we made the finals twice. Well, I think what McDavid is thinking is, did we make the finals twice because we had a great roster that I was a part of? Or did we make the finals twice because we had an average to an above average roster, especially at forward? And I'm not good. And I think it's the latter. I think McDavid is that good. That's how good I think McDavid is. When it comes to most Oilers fans, when they have this argument, it usually turns out that I think McDavid is way better than they think McDavid is. Because they really, really, really want their team to be really good when it's really not. Podkolzin is not a second liner. Arvidsson was not a second liner. Kapanen was not a second liner. Henrique is no longer a third line center anymore. This was a very shallow lineup. And he knows it. I believe he knows it. And here's something else. People talk about Florida being over the cap, $5 million, when they were in the playoffs, and that shouldn't be. Do you know that the Edmonton Oilers were $7 million under the cap? Under the cap. How could that be? You're trying to win a cup. You've got one of the wealthiest people in the world as your owner. You don't have a problem with money. Why? Because it's very difficult to draw people to the Edmonton Oilers. I lived there. I lived there for years. I lived there for 40 years. I loved it in the sense that I made a lot of money, because if you're a laborer or you're a tradesperson and you're living in Edmonton, you're living in one of the wealthiest cities in the world that way. It's heavy on oil. Jobs are everywhere. If you go up north, you're making big and you make a lot of money. But it's not the sexiest city in the world. It just isn't. It's cold as hell in the winter. Everybody knows that. If you go around the Edmonton downtown, it's not the prettiest or most exciting. Now, it's got some beautiful paths. They've really done well with that. Like, if you are a walking person, you can walk from one side of Edmonton to the other. They have great nature areas and all that kind of stuff like that. But compared to other cities, especially bigger cities you could go to that have much more amenities for millionaires, it's not the biggest draw in the world. And I think this is really coming down to being the issue. I think that the Oilers were saying, look, people are going to want to come here because they're going to want to win. And we have McDavid, and they're going to want to come play with you. And then to a certain extent, that has been true. But there hasn't been really significant players. They haven't been able to get a goaltender for quite some time. A great goaltender. And they had $7 million in cap space, remember? Wasn't like it couldn't happen. They kept on saying, well, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. You know that Stolarz, apparently, he had two choices that he was considering, and it was Toronto and Edmonton, and he chose Toronto. Why? He's got McDavid. So the draw has not been everything that they thought it would be to bring players in. Then they've had Broberg just happen where I don't even think the money mattered with him. They weren't able to pay him as much as he wanted because they had Bouchard and all of that. I could see him moving on simply because he wanted to be a top pair defenseman. However, Holloway, that was a big boner, man. Big boner. If you couldn't see that kid was going to be what he is right now back then, shouldn't be judging talent, man. It was obvious. And they should have gave him the money early. Whatever he was asking, I think it was like $3 million a year. That was an easy contract. So that made a big mistake. And that had me wondering. But I thought that maybe Holloway really just wanted to go to St. Louis as well. But as it turns out, he came out and said that he was really offended by that. So I think they dropped the ball there. They tried to make it better by getting Skinner, which I knew was going to be a disaster for sure. and grabbing Arvidsson and Podkolzin, which are pretty mid players. I know a lot of people just love to like Podkolzin in Edmonton. They just love to love him. I think that has more to do with hope than it does reality. He's going to be a solid player, but he's not a top two. So McDavid is looking at this going, we had four really good players. Kane, I'm sorry, he's a disaster on the ice. I don't care how many goals he scored. He has no idea what he's doing most of the time. His defensive awareness is brutal. He's only good to basically get in front of the net and score, which is good, but there's an overall game that wasn't good. And you got Draisaitl trying to work with Kapanen and Podkolzin, and a team like Florida is going to absolutely crush that. And I'm pretty sure McDavid saw it. They had 7 players. Oh, I forgot about Perry, too. Perry did excellent with what they gave him to do. He's a very smart player. Extremely smart player. Probably wouldn't play in Florida's top 6, though. Probably wouldn't have got that opportunity. He did really well with what they had. And now they're losing him. They're putting 2 kids in Savoy and Howard, who, if McDavid's listening to any scouts, it's not very likely he's going to be a significant piece this year. Savoy is kind of up in the air on what he's going to be this year as well. They went and got Mangiapane, which what I kind of liked, but in Florida, or in Washington, he didn't play the highest competition, and he did kind of okay. So if McDavid's looking at this, he's like, okay, where are we going from here? I don't want to be carrying another mid team into the finals. I'm tired of that. I'm not doing it anymore. I love, he poured out his blood for Edmonton. He's given everything he has and all of that. But honestly, he could do the same thing and go home. And if he happened to win a cup in Toronto, it would probably be his dream. Toronto hasn't won in a long time, but they probably got a better forward roster to work with. Maybe some similar, probably not much different. But at least if you did win, you'd be living a dream. Or you could go to a place like Tampa Bay, where basically if you insert McDavid into the roster, they're like cup favorites immediately. And they have an older roster, but a good 4-year window to win over and over and over again, as he said. So does he think in Edmonton they're going to win over and over and over again? What is it that Bowman is telling this guy that he hasn't told him for the last 10 years? It's going to make him believe now they're going to win over and over and over again. Now, Bowman wasn't there for the whole time, and I think Bowman has made some good moves in Wallman when he brought Wallman in. And who else really? Oh, like Klingberg was a good move. So you got that. But really, how is he going to convince him? Unless he has some players in his back pocket, has been talking to agents like with Connor, which I do believe happens, by the way. It's tampering, I know. But you don't have to talk to them. You can have scouts to gather information. I think teams find out stuff long before it actually happens. And I don't care. They just don't get caught, or they don't go over a line where it's tampering and they get away with it. So unless he's got like Connor in his back pocket or some players in his back pocket, and next year the Oilers have like almost a blank slate when it comes to cap space. And they can say, look, we know we have this guy. We know we have that guy. We're going to do everything we can to get some veteran wingers this year that's going to make us better than next year. They're going to do it. So McDavid's like, okay, I'll give you this year. Hold out. I'm not signing until I see what this team looks like. If these kids look like they're not good enough and they can't find anybody to replace them right away, or as it moves on, and this team, and he's looking around going, this team isn't as good as last year, and trade deadline comes and nothing's happening, he, I believe, will eventually go, I don't know. How many promises has he been made that a team's going to come, that a player is going to come and didn't come, or they're going to try to get a goaltender and they didn't, or they couldn't, and they gave him excuses and all of those sort of things like that. How many times has that happened? And of all of those times, of all of the times that those things did happen, how does he think now? How do I know this is going to happen now? I think McDavid wants to be sure. From this point on, I think he wants to believe he can win a cup every single year. Now, where would he go if he does decide to move on here? Yeah, Toronto's possible. It would be a dream, and I could see him saying, geez, you know what? It's probably the same kind of difficulties in Toronto, except you could probably draw players there more. There's a lot of people from Toronto, and you put McDavid there, and a lot of those people from Toronto, or just players in general, would want to play in Toronto. So you've got a better drawing team probably. It's cold in Toronto as well, but it's a bigger city, and there's much more available for wives. Remember, it's to do with wives as well. Wives and all of that kind of stuff like that. Education, if you got kids, they don't have kids, so that's not as big of a deal. But all of those kind of things come into play. It's possible. But if he's saying, I want to know that I can win over and over and over again, is he going to go to a team that hasn't been able to win since, 1967 or whatever the hell it is there in Toronto? It's dropped the ball over and over again. Just use Marner as a scapegoat, or it looks, I think they did anyways. And has used players as scapegoats before that, and seems to have a lot of corporate meandering going on that disables this team more than helps it. If he has that mind, I think that's exactly what happens in Toronto. You can tell me in the comment section if you do. Does he really want to go there? I know his family is there, but he didn't say my biggest thing is I want to be with family. He didn't say my biggest thing is I want to be home. His number one thing he said, and I don't know if it's actually true or not, but I'm just going by his words. I want to believe I can win over and over and over and over again. And I say, if that's the case, a team like Tampa Bay would be the place you'd want to go. You got Kucherov, you got Point, you got Hagel, you got Gunsel, you've got Sorelli, and these guys. Kucherov needs to be signed next year, but they're going to have, if they were to sign McDonough and McDavid combined, it'd be about $24 million. They'd still have $25 million to sign Kucherov in 2 years. And that's with the cap going up. So they'd still have tons of money to sign more players. And McDavid could take a little less there because of the tax situation. You say, well, he doesn't care about money. I agree he doesn't care about money. But what's wrong with making the same amount of money, taking less cap to help your team get more players, and more team players seem to like to go to that tax situation in Tampa Bay with McDavid in it, with the chance to win cup over cup over cup over cup. How many players will be lined up to go to Tampa Bay? They wouldn't have to worry about a rebuild, because as the cap goes up, they would just bring in the right players. And guess what? Tampa has shown to bring in the right players because they've won cups. So they know what they're doing. I would say Tampa Bay would be where I would go if I was a person who wanted to win over and over and over again. All right, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm sure I'll get all the Toronto vitriol in the comments and all that. I'm already discussing on Twitter as it is. Come catch me on Twitter. Pearlo's NHL POW, where all my videos on RNJ Media will be there. You can watch them there. When the Ice Guys start up again and I'm doing those, you'll get those. And I'm going to be you can get my bets, but this year, get yourself signed up to my Twitter community. There's a Twitter community, because if you want to get my bets this year, it's going to cost you a little bit of money. But if you're a community member, it's going to be very small. After that, it's going to go a little higher for people, but still not much. And like I said, voted best sports podcast in North America last year on the Ice Guys. Not really, probably a pretty good chance I'm not bad at what I do if I'm on a show like that. So making money, if you like to make money, like frolic, like enjoying hockey and all of that, you will enjoy it. So, Pearlo's NHL POW. Okay, everybody, talk to me in the comments. Okay, bye.